The windshield wipers of Lila Sanchez's old Subaru wheezed like asthmatic lungs, struggling against a biblical downpour that had swallowed the backroads of rural Pennsylvania whole. The headlights barely pierced through the curtain of rain. Each curve in the narrow asphalt ribbon felt like a gamble with fate. It was the kind of storm that made you question every decision that had led you to this exact moment. In Lila's case, a last-minute detour through Laurel Ridge after her GPS insisted this was the fastest route. She'd just left her sister's place in Pittsburgh, her chest tight with the weight of another failed conversation, and was headed back to the small farmhouse she'd been renting alone for nearly a year outside Altoona. The silence in the car, broken only by the thud, thud, thud of the wipers and the occasional slosh of tires hitting unseen puddles, was deafening. On the passenger seat sat a half-empty thermos of black coffee, a Tupperware of leftover empanadas, and an unopened letter from her old veterinarian, addressed to the estate of Mr. Pablo Sanchez. That one hurt. 6 months. That's how long it had been since she lost Pablo, her orange and white senior tabby. He'd been with her through 2 jobs, a divorce, and the decision to leave city life behind. She'd found him under a dumpster in Queens, starving and loud. He'd died in her arms on a rainy night just like this. His belly swollen with the fluid that came with wet FIP, a cruel, irreversible sentence. The memory of it still gnawed at her stomach. So when Lila heard it, that sound, it carved through her grief like a shard of glass. A cry, not human, but sharp and high, raw against the storm's roar. At first she thought it was her imagination, or maybe a weird echo of the wind rushing through bare oaks. But then it came again, louder, clearer, desperate. She slowed the car instinctively. No, 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 she muttered, eyes scanning the roadside. Don't do this again. But her foot was already on the brake. Her hand reached to switch on the hazards. The Subaru rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder just past a rusted sign that read, "Caution, falling rock zone." Lila peered through the streaming passenger window. There it was, a small shivering mass crouched beneath the signpost. Fur matted with rain, ears flattened, belly grotesquely distended. "Oh no," she whispered, the air leaving her lungs. She killed the engine and yanked a heavy knit blanket from the back seat, one her abuela had crocheted decades ago. Without a second thought, she opened the door. And the storm smacked her full in the face like an open palm. The mud was instant. It sucked at her boots with wet, slurping resistance as she trudged toward the creature. Her coat soaked through in seconds, hair plastered to her cheeks. The animal, kitten, she still thought, let out another cry. Less of a meow, more of a low, almost coughing whine. It looked odd. The fur was marked with rosettes and stripes, not the usual swirls of a tabby. Its ears were tall, with wild tufts at the tips, like little black flames. The paws were huge, oversized. Not just kitten big, but clownish. But the belly. That belly brought the ache back with brutal clarity. Lila's mind flashed to Pablo's final days. The way his stomach had ballooned with fluid. The way he couldn't jump up on the windowsill anymore. How he'd stopped purring the night before he died. This little thing was dying, just like Pablo. "I got you," she murmured, crouching low and ignoring the chill shooting up her spine. "You're not going out in the rain like he did. Not tonight." She tossed the blanket gently over the animal. It hissed, or chuffed, but didn't move, didn't fight. She scooped it up, swaddling the bundle tightly, and hustled back to the Subaru. Inside, she slammed the door shut, heart hammering. Rain pounded the roof like 1,000 fists. The heater hummed to life. The animal didn't move. She glanced at the dash. The nearest emergency vet was in Bedford, 28 miles south. Lila shifted into drive and hit the gas. "You're gonna make it," she said, voice shaking. "I won't let you go like he did." Behind her, in the soft folds of the soaked blanket, something with long ears and a massive belly purred like a little motor engine. She had no idea what she'd just brought into her car. But it was alive, and that was enough. The rain didn't let up for a second. By the time Lila reached the outskirts of Bedford, her knuckles were aching from gripping the steering wheel too tight. The defroster was fogging half the windshield while clearing the other half. And the kitten on her passenger seat had begun to stir. First came a paw, big, tufted, and padded, poking out from beneath the wet blanket like a stuffed animal come to life. Then a head, triangular, sleek, with short whiskers and those two absurd ear tufts now drooping with moisture. The animal blinked at her, not like a sleepy house cat, but like something older, wiser. The eyes were not blue. They were a sharp, penetrating gold green, like prairie grass lit from below. "You're really not a kitten, are you?" Lila muttered. The creature sniffed the air, sneezed once, then, without a second of hesitation, clambered out of the blanket and perched its oversized paws on the dashboard. "Oh no, no, down. That's not your perch." She tried gently coaxing it back, but it had the balance of a gymnast and the confidence of a cat who knew it was in charge. It batted at the dangling, scentless pine air freshener, then knocked it clean off the mirror with a nonchalant flick. "You're welcome," she deadpanned. "I hated that thing anyway." When the animal tried to crawl toward the steering wheel, she threw one arm across its path while keeping the other on the wheel. "Nope, that's the hazard light. Don't, oh great, you just turned on the wipers. Again." By the time she pulled into the glowing parking lot of Blue Hollow Emergency Veterinary, the kitten had toggled every knob on her dash, meowed once, or was it a growl, and somehow turned on the seat heater. She scooped it up again, or tried to. The animal was dense, not just chubby, but solid. Lila could feel the tautness of its belly even through the blanket, and panic twisted in her gut. What if it wasn't FAP? What if it was worse? Some kind of internal tumor? Congenital problem? She remembered how much it had cost to keep Pablo comfortable in those final days. She remembered draining her savings for those last-ditch treatments that hadn't worked. But she also remembered his purr, how he curled against her side in the final hours, trusting her completely. She couldn't let this one go without trying. Inside the vet's office, the warmth hit her like a wave. The lobby was empty except for a sleepy receptionist in scrubs sipping soup from a mug. "Emergency?" the woman asked, blinking. Lila nodded. "I found a stray. I think—" Her throat tightened. "I think he's got FIPE. His belly's really swollen. And the weather." The receptionist was already up, scribbling on a clipboard. "Let's get you into exam 2. Dr. Dorsey will be right in." A few minutes later, after toweling off both herself and the animal, Lila stood nervously in the sterile, fluorescent-lit exam room, pacing tiny muddy footprints into the tile. The animal was back on the table, wrapped like a burrito in the grandmother-made blanket, vibrating with a purr that seemed far too strong for something so fragile. The door swung open. A tall woman with a long silver braid and a calm, unbothered expression stepped inside, drying her hands with a paper towel. "I'm Dr. Dorsey," she said warmly. "You're the Good Samaritan with the kitten?" Lila laughed nervously. "Sort of. I mean, I thought he was a kitten, but now I'm not so sure. His feet are enormous, and he's got ear antennas." Dr. Dorsey smiled. "Let's take a look." She approached the table, gently pulling back the damp layers of blanket, and then she stopped, just for a moment, a blink, really, but long enough for Lila to notice. Dr. Dorsey's eyes went from amused to focused in a second flat. She leaned closer, examining the animal with a professional's precision. She touched the ears, lifted the chin, checked the paws. Then, wordlessly, she pulled on a pair of gloves. Lila's stomach dropped. "Is it bad?" Dr. Dorsey didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gently pressed her fingers against the creature's belly. "No fluid movement," she murmured. "Feels firm, but not distended in a dangerous way. So, not FEP? Dr. Dorsey finally looked up and gave Lila a curious half-smile. No, definitely not FIP. Lila slumped into the nearest chair. Her heart was still racing. Then what's wrong with him? Why does he look like that? Dr. Dorsey took a breath, clearly choosing her next words with care. Well, for starters, this isn't a house cat. And it's not a he either. Lila blinked. Wait, what? This, the vet said, with a light chuckle, is a female bobcat. And based on her size, weight, and dentition, I'd say she's about 8 months old. The room went utterly silent. Save for the steady rumble of the animal's purr, Lila just stared. I brought a bobcat into my car? Dr. Dorsey nodded. You did. And by the sound of it, she turned on your heated seat too. That was it. The last thread of tension snapped. Lila laughed. Not politely. Full belly, surprised, borderline hysterical laughter. Oh my God, she gasped between breaths. I stuffed a bobcat into a soggy blanket and drove it through a thunderstorm thinking it had a terminal illness. Dr. Dorsey grinned. You wouldn't be the first. The bobcat rolled onto her back and batted playfully at the stethoscope hanging from Dr. Dorsey's neck. Well, the vet said, I know one place in this area that would have a hand-raised bobcat. Let me make a call. 10 miles away, in the modest office of the Whitetail Creek Wildlife Education Center, Curtis Bloom was having a long night. The storm had knocked out their internet. A tree branch had nearly flattened the staff mailbox. And to top it all off, one of their permanent residents had vanished. Again, Curtis stood in front of the open enclosure gate, rain pelting his back, holding the metal hook that was supposed to secure the lock. His jaw clenched. The hook was intact. The eyelet was in place. But somehow, once again, Artemis had managed to outsmart the system. 3rd time in 6 weeks, he muttered, running a hand over his bald head. She's going to drive me to retirement. A younger staffer named Jenna appeared from the maintenance shed, soaked to the bone but holding a flashlight and 2 towels. Any sign of her on the cameras? Curtis shook his head. Either she's found a blind spot, or she figured out how to climb onto the roof again. I wouldn't put anything past her. Artemis wasn't like the other rescues at Whitetail Creek. She'd come in as a 4-week-old orphan. Her mother struck and killed on Route 220. At first, they'd hoped to raise her for re-release. But that dream faded fast. From the beginning, Artemis had shown an unnatural comfort around humans. She treated staff like her littermates, their shoelaces like prey, and their voices like lullabies. Worse, she never developed proper hunting skills. The rehab team tried enrichment, live prey training, even supervised outdoor foraging. Nothing worked. They finally accepted that Artemis would never make it in the wild. So, she became an ambassador animal. A living, breathing example for school groups and tourists to learn about native wildlife. She lived in a spacious enclosure, complete with climbing logs, a shallow stream, and a heated den. She also, apparently, lived to escape. The first time had been clumsy. She'd wriggled through a tear in the temporary mesh enclosure as a juvenile. They'd found her snoozing under the snack cart outside the visitors center. The second time, more impressive, she'd opened a bolt latch by repeatedly headbutting the door until the vibration shook it loose. This time? Curtis didn't even want to guess. The latch mechanism was human-level tricky. And yet here he was, soaked, bewildered, and holding evidence that his smartest resident had outwitted them all. She's probably curled up in someone's garage, Jenna offered, trying to sound hopeful. Maybe she doubled back. Let's just hope she didn't make it out past the tree line, Curtis muttered. Or worse. The ring of the office phone cut through the storm like a siren. Curtis was halfway back inside when Jenna called after him. If that's her calling to gloat, I'm done. He didn't laugh. Not until he picked up the receiver and heard a calm, professional voice on the other end. Hi, this is Dr. Claire Dorsey at Blue Hollow Emergency Veterinary in Bedford. I believe we may have one of your animals here. Curtis straightened. Wait, Artemis? She's safe, Dr. Dorsey said. Very well fed, very dry thanks to someone's crocheted blanket. Curtis let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Relief crashed over him like the storm outside. Thank God. Is she okay? Injuries? Did she scare anyone? On the contrary, the vet chuckled. She got herself rescued by a woman who thought she was an abandoned kitten. The woman's convinced she saved a sick house cat from a fatal disease. Curtis closed his eyes. She took a bobcat into her car? Drove her through a thunderstorm. Artemis even adjusted the car settings. Now he did laugh. A deep, tired, honest laugh. That sounds like her. I figured she had to be from a licensed facility. She's far too socialized to be wild. She's Houdini in a fur coat, Curtis said. We've reinforced that enclosure so many times, I'm starting to feel like I'm in a cartoon. She always finds a way. I'd suggest a biometric scanner next time. Curtis snorted. Already on my wish list. I take it you'd like her back? Absolutely. I'll be there within the hour. Bring a reinforced crate, and maybe a padlock. When Curtis hung up, he looked out at the swirling rain and gave the storm a one-finger salute. All right, Artemis, he muttered. Let's go retrieve your Royal Highness. He packed a travel crate lined with fleece, grabbed her favorite sardine treats, and headed for the truck. The rescue had already happened. Now came the reunion. Back in exam room 2, the Bobcat, Artemis, apparently, was curled up on the steel table like she owned the place. Lila sat hunched on the corner stool, still dripping rainwater, her soaked jeans sticking to her legs. She watched the animal with a kind of reverent disbelief, hands clasped between her knees. Artemis blinked lazily at her, unbothered. She looked far more comfortable than any of the cats Lila had ever known. She had repositioned herself precisely beneath the ceiling vent, where the warm air blew gently across her tufted ears, and was now stretching one paw out dramatically, like a feline model on a high-end rug commercial. Dr. Dorsey was leaned against the counter, arms folded, clearly amused. You sure she's not a dog? Lila finally said, her voice a little hoarse. I mean, she's got zero fear. She just moved into my car like it was her summer cabin. The vet smiled. That's hand-rearing for you. She likely imprinted on people early. I'd guess she was raised in a rehab facility that couldn't reintroduce her to the wild. Lila gave a long exhale. So she's not dying.